Hi guys, welcome back to the channel that researches, explains, and illustrates real-life events regarding Christians in a simple, clear, and tactical way for everyday life. Just practical truth you can understand and apply right away. I break down day-to-day Christian news into easy visual illustrations from authentic sources that help Christians stay alert to what is going on around the world. Today, we will dive into a sensitive, complex, severe religious and security crisis that concerns Christians in Nigeria, specifically highlighting allegations of systemic Christian justice and the government's perceived failure to protect its citizens. Research from various sources gives testimonies from legal experts and survivors who describe brutal attacks by militant groups. We will also explore the international response and the government's perceived failure to protect its citizens. Research from various sources gives testimonies from legal experts and survivors who describe brutal attacks by militant groups. We will also explore the international response, including a resolution by the US Congress and the delivery of American military equipment intended to combat terrorism. Furthermore, the sources discuss internal political tensions, such as the debate over Muslim leadership tickets and the military's firm stance against negotiating with terrorists. Ultimately, the research portrays a nation struggling with mass displacement, religious persecution, and a deep distrust of state security and governance. Exciting stuff. Nigeria, how far now? Do not forget to like and subscribe. Watch the illustration of the research.
So, to really get what's going on, we have to start with the people. Forget the politics for a second, because behind all the headlines and the debates, there are real families, real lives that have been completely and utterly shattered. Meet Frank Uto. He's a lawyer, and his village, Yawata, was attacked. And his words, they just cut right to the heart of it all. He's not talking about abstract statistics, he's talking about his family. 278. According to Frank, that's how many of his relatives were killed in one single night. Just let that number sink in for a second. It's almost impossible to wrap your head around. The devastation for his family is just total. His youngest sibling, who is only 3 years old, is now a refugee, trying to survive on a single shared pack of noodles each day. And you know, Frank's story isn't an isolated one. This account comes from a US congressman who was recently on the ground there. He met survivors face to face and heard these testimonies of just unspeakable brutality. But here's where it gets really complicated. When you ask why this is happening, the answer you get is fiercely debated. This is the core of it, a true battle for the truth, with two very different competing stories. So, on one side, you have the argument that this is a targeted religious genocide specifically against Christians. But on the other side, the view is that it's a much broader, complex national crisis, a total failure of security that's affecting everyone, no matter what their faith is. People who support that first narrative, like Frank Uto, they don't mince words. They argue that any Muslims killed in these attacks are just tragic collateral damage in a much larger war against Christians. But then you have the Nigerian government pushing back hard. The defense minister, Christopher Musa, insists that both faiths are victims of criminals, and this is absolutely not some state sponsored campaign against any single religion. Okay, but then you see data like this, and it really throws a wrench in any simple explanation. According to one conflict monitoring group, in direct attacks on civilians over a 5 year period, more Muslims were reportedly killed than Christians. That adds a whole other layer of complexity, doesn't it? And this battle for the truth, it's not just staying within Nigeria's borders. Oh no, it has gone global. Both sides are now fighting for the world's attention, for its support. So how exactly is this information war being fought? Well, according to Frank Uto and other sources, it's being fought with a lot of money, $9 million to be exact. And where did that $9 million allegedly go? The higher lobbyists in Washington, D.C. The goal was to get inside the halls of power and directly influence how the American government sees this conflict. As Frank Uto claims, this lobbying is basically a direct counterattack against that genocide narrative that's been gaining steam overseas. It just goes to show how high the stakes are in this war of words. And you have this whole cast of global figures jumping in. You've got politicians like President Trump pushing for action, and even celebrities like Nicki Minaj using their platform. But at the same time, you have analysts like Balama Bukardi warning everyone to slow down, saying that a simple story might actually be hiding a much more complex reality. Okay, so while the rest of the world is busy debating the why, Let's go back to the ground in Nigeria, because the government there is rolling out a brand new, very aggressive strategy to deal with the how. The defense minister's warning here is pretty chilling. He's sending a clear message to anyone even seen as sympathizing with these armed groups. There is no middle ground anymore. And this right here, this is the new playbook. The time for negotiations and peace deals is officially over. What's replacing it is a hardline, no mercy policy. They're calling it a full kinetic solution, which is a military way of saying direct, active, and overwhelming force. So, this all leads us to the biggest, most important question of all. This new military strategy is an answer to the violence, sure, but it also makes you wonder, how does the story we choose to believe define what justice even looks like? Think about it. If the world decides this is a religious genocide, the call might be for international intervention, for sanctions, maybe even for trials at The Hague. But what if the accepted story is that this is a complex crisis of crime and poor governance? Well, then the solution looks completely different. The focus shifts inward to building up internal security, to economic development, and to fixing the justice system from the inside out. And that leaves us with this incredibly difficult, vital question. In a world with so many competing truths, maybe our most important duty is just to stay vigilant, to listen to all sides, and to never, ever forget the human cost. We'll explore solutions on three levels: international, military, and spiritual and civic action. First, let's talk about pressure from abroad, specifically looking at the United States' role. A key demand is to redesignate Nigeria as a country of particular concern, or CPC. Now, this is a big deal. The CPC status, which can trigger sanctions, was actually removed in 2021. All right, let's move to the national level and see how Nigeria's military strategy is shifting. This powerful statement from the defense minister signals a pretty dramatic change in policy. What this means is an official end to negotiating so-called peace deals with bandits. So the crucial point is this pivot to a direct, military-focused or kinetic approach. And this new strategy is supported by much tighter military cooperation with the United States. Finally, let's get to the heart of it: faith and civic action at the community level. The first and maybe most important action is simple: breaking the silence. This is all about the global church speaking up, making sure Nigerian believers know they're not alone. But it goes beyond words. There's also a massive call for direct, tangible aid. We're talking about basics like food and shelter for thousands of displaced Christians on the ground. And organizations like Open Doors are on the front lines providing this life-sustaining support.
Finally, we must be awake to these conflicting narratives to truly understand the spiritual and physical warfare our fellow Christians are facing. Our vigilance is required to understand that silence in the face of evil is itself evil. We need to ensure Nigerian believers know they are not alone and that they are part of a global body of believers. Help is coming. God bless you all.